let me start with the US election story that has attracted enormous attention from the world community. Now, what could you say about the likely impact of the outcome of US election, presidential election, or also Senate, on the future of ESG, economy, and international relations, especially US-China relationship down the road?
So to begin with, we have to recognize that that American society and potentially many other parts of the world are polarized. There is a number of factors and variables that are forcing the rethinking of society, whether it's politically, economically, militarily, socially, and the like. So clearly, America is no exception to that. There is a great deal of debate and discussion as to what is the best social organization. Should there be only certain types of people accepted to come into the country, or should there be a more diverse, number of people? What is the best economic policy relative to the rest of the world? What is the most appropriate trade policy and the like? So all of that has created enormous consequences in the thinking and the deliberations as to what is the best system that America needs to have to continue to prosper. Now, there's also another thing to recognize, which is a lot of people think that the US Congress and the US political system is polarized. And I take exception to that, because it is the political representatives are people that speak for their constituencies, for their audiences. So it's not just that the Congress is divided and the political system is divided. We have to see through that the population are divided. And we see it right now between the red states and the blue states and all of that. So with the victory of the Democratic Party by a very small margin, obviously Joe Biden, becoming the next president of the United States, and the Democrats having control of the White House, not clear yet, what the control of the Senate will be. It looks like it will be Republican, but we'll find out in the next few months. Based on a few other elections that need to take place. I think that you will have a lot of new policies with respect to ESG. You will see the federal government taking a more proactive approach, to climate change. So potentially rejoining the Paris deal. You will see them taking a much more proactive approach on social issues of diversity and inclusion in American society. You will see them taking a different perspective on trade. Traditionally, the Republicans have been the ones that were pro-trade. It could be provocatively that you may now see the Democrats being more pro-trade than the Republicans and the like. So I think that we already have this year a major force in ESG coming out of all the other issues that are happening in the world. I believe that all of that was happening bottom up in America. Now you're going to have the leadership of the federal government, potentially helping reshape from the top down, some of these issues. Now, in this polarization of America, I think that with the outcome of this election, which is there is a clear winner in the Democratic Party, but not a clear winner across the board, whether one party or another one. I think that what is going to happen is, which is, I believe, good news, is that everyone needs to come to the table to compromise. There's not going to be one party having full control of one thing or another party. And now everyone has to come to the table and say, we have to all work together to solve these issues. That hasn't worked in the last number of years. Under the Obama administration and the Trump administration has not worked well. I believe that under Biden, who is more of a centrist, is more of a compromiser, we have some hope that that will be the case. and therefore many of the ESG policies, will have to be done with the support of both parties.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. How about U.S.-China relationship down the road?
So I think there is a consensus in America that that China has emerged and is a competitor to economically and politically, and in some cases militarily, to the U.S. And as the U.S. being the sole superpower in the world, is not used to now dealing with another superpower. The last time that happened was going back 30 years ago with the Soviets. So it will take some adjustment for America to now let somebody else also share the limelight, in the world. That will take some adjustment. Secondly, I think America also recognizes that the world has treated China as an emerging market, and as such, all the policies and all the procedures in the world are designed to give let's say, access to markets, to emerging markets, in order to help those societies and those economies develop. And I think at this point, America says China is no longer an emerging market. It's already an economic powerhouse. So why should we be letting them have access free to America or free to Europe by the Europeans as well, when they're not giving access to American goods and services in China? So I think that there is now a realization by the West that the policies have to change. And I think there's still a little bit of denial, I think, by China to admit that that is the case, because the way I normally say it is, America looks at China as a total GDP, and China looks at itself as GDP per capita. So we say GDP per capita, we're still a very poor country, and the US says, well, but the total GDP is a lot bigger than pretty much every other country in the world except America for now. So there is a little bit of a dichotomy of the way they look at each other. So I think what is going to happen under the Biden administration is that the substance of the arguments are going to remain largely the same. I think the style of debate and discussion is going to be less bombastic. It's going to be less public. It's going to be less public pressure, and that may be good, or it may not be good.
Okay, that's an excellent summary of the situation. Appreciate that very much. Coming back to ESG issue here, as you know, Henry, ESG is not a new concept. It's been around with us at least for last 10 years or so. Now, then, what are the major drivers of mainstreaming ESG, especially in the aftermath of COVID?
I would say that ESG has been with us for a very long time, to begin with, and in its broadest definition. What ESG is from the societal point of view, is the concept of holding the institutions of society accountable to the benefit of society. So if a country is not well governed, society responds, right? If a company is not well governed, society needs to respond. If a country is allowing a degradation of the environment, society responds. So if a company does the same, society needs to respond. So a lot of the things have been with us, for a long time. I think what is happening nowadays in this digitally interconnected world is the information transmits very, very fast and in large quantities. So therefore, society, when confronted with that information, it is becoming less and less tolerant of the abuses of institutions in society, whether they are political, religious, educational, or investment institutions or corporate institutions, right? So I think that's one driver of all of this. And therefore, as social media expands, as communication expands, as the transmission of information expands, in which there are no longer that many secrets that people can hide. We are bound to see a lot more of that. Now, economically, ESG is not new either, because ESG is about the externalities that a free market system develops or throws, a capitalistic system in which externalities about polluting an environment and not paying the price, or creating injustices, with your labor management policies, or having bad governance. So I think what is happening right now is the process of internalizing all of that, and that's a good thing for the free enterprise system.
Okay, that's great. Yep. Now, amongst the ESG, environmental, social, and governance, these days, lots of attention are being paid to E-part, environmental protection, and dealing with the climate change. Now, what impact this pandemic have on this sort of trend, if you like, putting much more emphasis on this climate change issue?
Yeah, so I think what COVID and the global pandemic has done is shed incredible light on a number of issues that are going on, in the world. I think with respect to the environment and climate change, at a minimum, the world has begun to recognize that the world was not prepared to deal with a crisis, a health crisis that is taking place. There was no coordination, there was no cooperation, there were no global policies on travel, and every country was for themselves, and some leaders took it seriously and other leaders didn't take it seriously. So a lot of the climate change crowd is saying, my goodness, if the world wasn't ready to deal with a global pandemic, which is not going to destroy the entire planet, imagine what could happen, if we have an environmental crisis, a global environmental crisis. We are not in a position to deal with that, effectively, and the like. So there was a wake-up call, because of that governance. The second thing was that what COVID has done is also created an awareness, and this is not much talked about, an awareness of potentially the limits to growth. If we keep populating the planet, and if we keep expanding in all parts of the planet, we clearly will be encroaching on a lot of lands and a lot of areas that have created, a balance, in our life, including, certain animals that then migrate and infect domesticated animals and then pass on viruses to, to humans. So this was talked about in the early part of the pandemic. Notice that everyone at the beginning was talking about, where did this come from? Was this from bats? Did it go into pigs, or did it go into rare animals, or whatever? No one is talking about that anymore, right? Nobody is going back to say, what was the origin of this? At some point, there will be a postmortem saying, where did this come from? And was it, related to that? The third part that COVID has created is because the world shut down, because cities shut down, obviously with big economic pain. I think we had a glimpse of what cities look like without congestion. We had a glimpse of what the air looked like, that was clean. And I think that is another call, to say, wasn't that a great planet? Obviously it was not good because we were destroying a lot of jobs and destroying a lot of families, on the way. But can we find a way to look at the world that way, in the way that was happening during the pandemic, during the worst of the pandemic? Because that looked good from the environmental point of view. Obviously, it looked horrible from the economic, point of view, and the suffering and the death of precious life, etc. So I think there is a lot. So when I believe, that when the story gets all done and written about COVID and 2020, we are going to look at this period as an incredible catalyst, as an incredible milestone in the transformation of a lot of things in the world, including ESG investing and obviously sustainable finance. So a lot of people talk about sustainable investing, and other people talk about sustainable finance. Is two sides of the same coin, right? Sustainable investing is about the providers of capital, and sustainable finance is about the users of capital in a society. So it's the same concept, but we're going to see quite a lot of revolution in all of this.
Okay, great. In the past, my sense is that ESG has been mostly talked about in conjunction with ESG investing. But these days I hear more often about expanding that to the like corporate management priorities or even government policy agenda. Now, I would just like to give you an example. Amongst the major conglomerates, business groups in Korea, SK Group has recently declared that they would like to be the leader in ESG. So the chairman, Choi, himself declares that. So there's a broadening of the adoption of the ESG concept. Now, how will ESG in the future? This is perhaps the beginning of that sort of change. Impact on future corporate management, government policies in more substantive way. So in a way, this ESG, originally thought about as a sort of a micro tool, is becoming the mainstream, the major macroeconomic tool to change the entire economic system and the way corporates function.
The answer is yes. It will be, no, it is already a major transformational force, in the world, in many aspects of the world. It's already mainstream. That you asked me that question before. It's already mainstream. There's only a question of, are you a leader in the mainstream of ESG, or are you a laggard in the mainstream of ESG? This is no longer an isolated event that is taking place in niche products in the investment business or in the finance business. This is now taking over the entire investing and finance, industries. Just a question of progression and a question of leaders and laggards, and all of that. It's going to lead to a major transformation of the world because of that interconnectivity, that the digitalization of the world, the interconnectivity of the world, the transmission of information is so fast that whatever happens in one corner of the world gets transmitted to another corner of the world very fast. So that's going to continue to accelerate, all of this. So the big transformations are, if you think about it this way, governance was a big transformation that took place, decades ago and continues to be. The governance is the necessary condition for sustainable investment and sustainable finance, but it's not sufficient. Then you have these two forces of climate within the environmental part, and then you have the social issues. The climate is already here. It's already mainstream that we have a climate problem in the world. And what are we going to do about that? And what is the role of companies? What is the role of investors? What is the role of those actors in society to deal with that? And then you have the social issues, which are depending on the country and the region of the world, they're different, and they may be lagging or they may be leading. In America today, between the three sectors, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, the biggest one is social. Right now, the biggest issues in America are social. It's about sexual harassment, sexual discrimination, about the role of women, about the role of blacks, about the culture, the working culture in your company, and so on and so forth. You can see many issues. If you dig deep into the resigning of a university president, the resignation of a media leader, or the problems in a company. When you go deep into them, most of the time you see a social issue, taking place. So a lot of this is going to transform the world, and it's going to be a better world. It's going to be a more inclusive world. It's going to be a more caring world in the context of a free market society. So I think the role for all of us is to say, do we fight this and become a laggard and eventually overtakes us, or do we take leadership and be at the top? Be at the top of that transformation. And I think what you're doing and you're saying is many Korean entities are already saying, let us not be behind this. Let us embrace this. Let us make sure we don't defy this. Let us try to be at the leadership of this, because this is a change that is not a fad. It's a change that is here to stay in the world.
Yeah, I think your point on that we have already achieved the mainstreaming of ESG, and now we are moving into much bigger transformation into the next level. That is a very important point, because many people don't seem to understand where this ESG stands today. It has already emerged as the main driver for inclusive capitalism or sustainable growth. So I think that point was very important. And then what we should do to move up to the next level. I think that's the...
Yeah, it's already mainstream, and now it's a question of spreading, deepening and widening. So this is already a force that is taking over the world, and obviously, like an early force, it needs to widen its base, and it needs to deepen it in terms of standards and data and protocols and policies and all of that, right?
Okay, so now not only in mainstreaming and in deepening, in further transforming the whole thing to the next level, what role should MSCI play in facilitating that as the leader in this field?
So when we started our ESG products and services over a decade ago, we set ourselves a goal that we wanted to be a leader in mainstreaming ESG, making it part of every investment decision in the world. When, if you look at an investment, you look at risk and you look at return. A lot of that is financially driven. Then you now need to look at these non-financial metrics that are going to have an impact on your investment. So that is something that we have achieved. What we want to be at MSCI is to be a leader in providing all the necessary investment tools to facilitate, the ESG investing process, the sustainable finance process. And that starts with an understanding of companies and issuers with respect to what is it that they do and what kind of things they do that are pro ESG or against ESG. Then translating all of that research into ratings. We currently rate about 20,000 issuers between bond and equity issuers. Then is to incorporate ESG in risk models in your portfolios, and to do all of this in equities, in fixed income, to do it in the private asset classes. So, for example, recently we launched what we call a climate value at risk, and it's a methodology that is forward-looking to understand the impact in your portfolio depending on various degrees of warming of the planet. So we're now taking that methodology and applying it, or helping our clients apply it to real estate portfolio. What is the climate value at risk of your real estate portfolio? If you own a lot of real estate in coastal cities, and the planet warms by 2 or 2.5 degrees, what is the impact of that in your portfolio? What is the impact of the value of those properties? So I think we want to be a facilitator. We want to help the world deal with this transformation. In our case, is obviously about the investment industry, and the finance industry is obviously not about other institutions. And that's the role that we want to play.
Okay, great. Perhaps last but not least, I may call this question of the day. What will be the lasting legacy of COVID-19 on ESG investing? You have, outlined some of the issues relating to this already, but come to think of it, if you look at the history of economic crisis in the past, usually what happens right after the crisis is over, start talking about impairing existing capitalistic environment by way of having more inclusive environment, making more sustainable. This is not new. We have done that before whenever we have gone through a global economic crisis. But some time has passed, then the excitement or intensity about desire to incorporate those themes recede. Now, is this resurgence of ESG consideration temporary or permanent, to be to grow further down the road? How would you assess that?
So JK, I view COVID and the global pandemic as World War III. It was a global war against an invisible enemy, which has made it incredibly more difficult than a conventional war against other human beings. This is an invisible enemy. And as such, therefore, when you think about the last 100 years in the world, we had World War I, that changed the world. A number of empires fell, you remember that. Then World War II dramatically changed the world. The COVID in World War III is going to change the world in many ways. And one of those ways, clearly, with respect to your question, is going to be ESG. I think we will reflect on this period as saying this global war, this global pandemic ushered a lot of ESG and sustainable investing issues in the world. As you know well too, a lot of the world operates on a gradual change. Every year, every day, there is gradual change. But there's also sudden changes, step functions that happen. And whether it's an exogenous factor like the global financial crisis or something like this crisis, which is obviously unprecedented. So I think when you combine those two, all those things, we are definitely being set up for dramatic change coming out of this, crisis. And ESG will be one of those, because we're already seeing accelerated. When you look at the investment industry, the portfolios that have done the best over the last 6-9 months have been the portfolios that are more ESG aware, ESG friendly. A lot of leaders have been calling, either governmental leaders or corporate leaders are being evaluated on the basis of what was their response to protect their citizens. What was their response to protect their employees? Did they take the health and the well-being of their employees into account, or they simply say it's all about the money, it's all about the products, it's all about other factors? So that is a decision that a lot of leaders have to make. We talked about the impact of ESG of COVID on the climate and the perception of issues on the climate, governance. Going back to the issue, if you look at political institutions today, if you look at governments today, there will be an evaluation of what governments were able to use their governance to deal with this crisis and what government failed in that governance. I think it's too early. We can see the ones that did well and the ones that didn't do well, but it's yet too early to say who was voted out because of that and who won in the concept of that. There are a lot of emerging markets, that are suffering through this. There's obviously America and the West, Western Europe. So anyhow, I think that we are in a period of change We may not feel it totally, just like, if we were in another war, we may not feel it. We have not seen all the consequences, but that's what is happening. Now, at the end of this, I believe that the world will be resilient. I believe that the free market system that we have developed will be refreshed, will be improved, will make it a more sustainable economic system, will make it more inclusive system. It will be more empathetic of the plights of different societies and different actors in the society, different parts of the community, whether it's Black, whether it's low income, whether it's high income, and the like. Those are all things that are happening right now. If you look at a company in America and you say, the white collar workers can work remotely and the blue collar workers, cannot. So what do? Do you lay off all the service employees that need to be in the front lines and keep the other ones, and therefore create a major disruption in quality and inequality and the like, or not? So those are very thorny issues that everyone is dealing with. So anyhow, the conclusion of in my view, my opinion is this World War III will usher a period of change. A lot of that will be, in our case, in our topic of ESG driven, and it will transform society, it will transform companies, it will transform investment institutions. And I think the role of all of us, when we observe that, is to say, do you want to be a follower or you want to be a leader? Do you want to deny this or you want to embrace it? And which side are you going to be on, right?
Okay. Excellent. This great way of close your statement. I felt like my heart was pumping as I hear what you said. But also, COVID-19 is World War III. That should be a headline of the speech. Thank you very much for your thought-provoking and insightful speech.
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me.
We'll share widely your state. Thank you very much for taking your time to join us at our conference. Very much appreciated. I wish you and MSCI, your colleagues, all the best down the road.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.